I wanted to mention the question of Malthusianism, and I think it's just really, really crucial. The idea that overpopulation is the first cause of the crisis. This is going back to Marx. One of Marx's great nemesis, you could say, was Malthus, who was really the founder of the discourse of poverty as well as the discourse of scarcity. And so this is coming back in all sorts of ways. It's a debate that it makes common sense, right? We all know that there's a whole lot of people on the planet, and you live in certain cities, not this one, but certain cities, where you really can sense that, yeah, there's more cars, there's more people on public transit, and there's a sense that just viscerally that is the problem, overpopulation. So I want to throw that out there. That is the kind of politics that eco-socialism, eco-anarchism, ecofeminism are all going to have to contend with. And one version of it, I think, that's become very popular, it's complex, but peak oil, right? The notion of peak oil, the notion of absolute scarcity being the fundamental crisis, I think really needs to be interrogated. And when you start hearing about scarcity, I think our alarm bells should ring if we go back to what Malthus said. There was a interdisciplinary group of biologists, geographers, economists, who decided that if the Earth was simply valued better, then we would value it more. And so they came up with a price tag for the entire biosphere, including eco watersheds, airsheds, the oceans, all life on Earth. And they came up with what I think was a very low figure of $27 trillion. This was about 10 or 12 years ago, which now, of course, doesn't seem like the Goldman Sachs balance sheet.
We're going far beyond the sort of liberal notion of women being equal to men, insofar as we recognize that exploited men are not very much to live up to, and it really centers a whole new conception of control over production. When we speak about production, we're not only speaking about waged production, but the production of the most important commodities under capitalism, being labor and natural resources to start with, and women being the the producers of people, and ultimately needing to be in control of that production process and the conditions of that work. Indigenous people being the producers and stewards of nature. We see time and again when people are cleared out of forests for conservation measures that the forest is no longer conserved because the indigenous people have been stewarding those resources for millennia. But it goes even beyond that to suggest that all peoples, waged and unwaged, employed and unemployed, are in the process of, in the move to a post-capitalist world, of a reinvention of commoning. So at the same time where farmers in this rural area are trying to make a living growing food, there's oil pipelines and gas wells being drilled by eminent domain right through people's farms. In this one case that a farm I recently visited, and keep in mind that I'm talking about actually existing instances of people reinventing the commons or commoning and establishing some sort of food sovereignty. And I'm using these sort of extreme cases to show that, look, if they can do it, other people who have even more resources or better weather or better access to amenities could probably do it as well.
The notion of freely associated labor pursuing ecocentric ends, okay, with an ecocentric ethic, if you like. We would hope and expect, and indeed not settle for less than that the whole earth would be run this way. Ecosocialism has to take into account the fullness of its implications, and it must be open to everybody in the world. It must be a global movement.
I have a question and sort of a thought for further discussion. My name is Sarah, and I'm from San Francisco. I'm a member of Freedom Road Socialist Organization, and I was in Cochabamba. I met some of you at the workshop that you all did there, and was really excited about this idea of a network. And I'm wondering sort of what the relationship is or could be with the network to the social movements that are already doing a lot of work around climate justice, and sort of what the relationship is between eco-socialists and the social movements that don't identify as explicitly socialist. And then where does that leave sort of this network, like who participates in the network, and what's the goal of being a member of this network?
Include everybody and not sacrifice anybody. And I think the eco-socialist, eco-feminist conception has to include everybody. As Joel was saying, it's really about life and all life. And so how can we, like practically speaking, in terms of tactics and strategy, which I really welcome this idea about strategy. Let's get down to some strategy. How can we connect with the people in the world who want to shut down big oil? And what has that got to do with the transition, basically eliminating capitalism and moving to some kind of commoning, as Lee Brownhill has described it? And I think it's totally central and a very useful kind of double-barreled concept that I use in thinking about this kind of strategic coming together and moving forward as capitalism is collapsing around our ears, is Marx's insight. Now, a lot of people will disagree with this, and I don't think we have to conform. I mean, it's useful for some of us. Marx had this insight that as these large corporations got bigger and bigger, we were being drawn together globally into a world market or into a cyberspace connectivity.
To talk more about what are we actually doing on the local level, and to build a broad-based movement. I mean, we need the broadest movement possible to take on questions of energy conservation, environmental racism, public transportation, shutting down the coal plants. There are wedge issues that are coming to the fore. People have been campaigning for many years against mountaintop removal, and that's something that is so extreme that we need to fight on small things to get those won, that gives confidence to build into the future. So I think at the same time as we need the big kind of, what kind of world do we want to live in, we need to unite the practice with the theory and be doing both things at once. And I don't think that's like an astounding insight of mine or anything. It's pretty obvious that's what we need to do.
I'm with Canadian Dimension magazine, and we do an interview with Joel in the next issue, along with articles by Teresa and Lee. I wanted to talk a bit about the identifying a role for the Eco-Socialist International Network that takes into account some of the discussion we've had here. I see the Eco-Socialist International Network as a kind of intellectual project, a project by intellectuals, a communications project, and in order to do its job as a network of communication, I think it likely has to develop a partnering or a connection, a formal connection with Cochabamba, the Converging Storms, the eco-justice movements around the world, the tar sands, groups against the tar sands, the indigenous environmental network, and so much more that's happening.